The moment I saw Amanda walk through the front door, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't that she was late. She had been late plenty of times before. It wasn't even the fact that she was a little too dressed up for a simple work dinner. No, it was the way she stepped inside, careful, deliberate, like she was sneaking into her own home. I sat in the living room, the TV on but muted, a beer in my hand, acting as casual as I could manage. She froze when she saw me, just for half a second, but I caught it. A hesitation, a recalibration, a moment of panic before she forced a smile. "You're up late," she said, closing the door behind her and setting her purse down on the kitchen counter. Her heels clicked against the tile, echoing in the quiet house. She wasn't drunk, but she had been drinking. Her voice had that soft, loose quality, her movements just a little too smooth. "Yeah," I replied, taking a sip from my beer, watching her. Figured I'd wait up. "How was dinner?" She kicked off her shoes and stretched her feet, her hands gripping the edge of the counter as she turned to me. "Oh, the usual. Boring client talk, a couple of drinks, nothing exciting." She didn't meet my eyes when she said it. "Who was there?" She hesitated again, just a flicker, before she grabbed a glass and filled it with water from the fridge. "Just the team. Mark, Jenna, a few others." "Why?" I shrugged, keeping my voice level. "Just curious. You didn't text or call, so I figured you were having fun." She took a sip of water, swallowing a little too hard. "Oh, yeah, sorry, I lost track of time." I nodded slowly, setting my beer down on the coffee table. That was the third lie in under 2 minutes. Jenna, the coworker she mentioned, was on maternity leave. Mark had quit 2 months ago, and Amanda never lost track of time, not when she knew I was waiting. She walked past me toward the hallway, but I caught something as she moved. The faintest trace of a scent that didn't belong to her. It wasn't her usual perfume, the one I'd bought her last Christmas. No, this was something different, something unfamiliar. It wasn't even perfume, it was cologne. I stood up, stretching as if I were just tired, just ready for bed, but my mind was racing. As she disappeared into the bathroom, I walked over to her purse. I had never snooped through her things before, but tonight was different. I unzipped the main compartment and dug through the usual junk: wallet, keys, lipstick, gum, until my fingers brushed against something that didn't belong. A room key. Not just any room key. A hotel key card. I stared at it for a long moment, my pulse hammering in my ears. My hands clenched around the thin plastic, and for a second, I thought about storming into the bathroom and demanding an answer right then and there. But I didn't. No, this wasn't the kind of thing you confronted with just blind rage. This was the kind of thing you confirmed, the kind of thing you made sure of before you tore your whole life apart. I put the key back exactly where I found it, zipped up her purse, and walked back to the couch. I picked up my beer, took another sip, and waited. I waited for her to come back out, to act normal, to crawl into bed with me like nothing had happened. I needed to see just how good of a liar my wife really was. The next morning, I woke up before Amanda, lying there in the dim light filtering through the curtains, staring at the ceiling while my mind ran in circles. She was still asleep, curled up on her side, her breathing slow and steady. I could feel the heat of her body next to mine, but it felt foreign now, like she was a stranger in my bed. I turned my head slightly and watched her, trying to see if there was any sign, any small, telling detail that would confirm what I already knew. Her hair was still slightly damp from the shower she had taken the night before, her makeup removed, her face relaxed in sleep. She looked peaceful, completely unaware that her secrets weren't as safe as she thought they were. I felt a deep, burning resentment settle in my chest. I got up carefully, not wanting to wake her, and went to the kitchen. I made coffee, sitting at the table, my hands wrapped around the mug, staring at nothing. The hotel key card was burned into my memory. There was no innocent explanation for it. People didn't just carry around hotel keys unless they had been inside a hotel room. And Amanda hadn't mentioned any hotel. She had lied, straight to my face, without a second of hesitation. I needed to know more before I confronted her. If I came at her with only suspicions, she'd find a way to twist it, to turn it back on me, to make me feel like I was the crazy one. No, I needed more than a room key. I needed to know exactly what had happened in that hotel, who she had been with, how long it had been going on. Amanda came into the kitchen a few minutes later, yawning, stretching her arms above her head as she walked over to the coffee maker. She was wearing one of my old t-shirts, the same one she always slept in, acting like nothing had changed. "Morning," she said, her voice still thick with sleep. I watched her carefully. "Morning. Sleep well?" She nodded, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Yeah, you. I took a slow sip of mine. Yeah, though I kept thinking about something. Where'd you say you went last night again? She froze for just a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but I caught it. She recovered quickly, turning around with her mug in hand, leaning against the counter like nothing was wrong. Dinner with the team. Why? I shrugged, keeping my expression neutral. No reason. Just making conversation. She gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. You've been acting weird lately. Everything okay? That almost made me laugh. I had been acting weird? She was the one sneaking around, lying, hiding things, and yet somehow, she had the nerve to act like I was the one being different. I forced a smile. Yeah, just work stress. She seemed satisfied with that answer, nodding as she took a sip of her coffee. Yeah, I get that. I watched her as she moved around the kitchen, completely at ease, like she wasn't carrying around the weight of a betrayal. That told me one thing. This wasn't the first time she had lied. If she was guilty, she should have been more on edge, more cautious. But she was too comfortable, too smooth. She had been lying for a while. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to go to that hotel. I waited until she left for work before I grabbed my keys and drove to the address printed on the keycard. It wasn't far, just 15 minutes from our house, in the business district where a lot of corporate travelers stayed. The parking lot was mostly empty, a few cars scattered around, a couple of business people in suits walking in and out of the lobby. I sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the building, feeling a strange, cold detachment settle over me. Then I got out and walked inside. The lobby was bright, modern, filled with the usual dull beige and glass decor. I went up to the front desk, where a young woman in a pressed uniform greeted me with a polite smile. Good morning, sir. How can I help you? I pulled the key card from my pocket and set it on the counter. I think my wife left something in her room last night. Can you remind me what room this belongs to? She glanced at the key, then at me, hesitating. I'm sorry, but I can't give out that information. Hotel policy. I nodded, acting understanding. Right, of course. I just wanted to make sure I had the right hotel. My wife was here last night, but she left in a hurry this morning and thought she might have forgotten something. Maybe if I describe her, you could let me know if you remember seeing her. She hesitated again, clearly unsure. I'm not really supposed to it. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. Look, I get it. You have rules. I'm not asking for anything personal. I just want to know if my wife was here, and maybe if she was alone. That did the trick. She sighed, glancing around before lowering her voice to match mine. I don't know if I should say this, but she wasn't alone. I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my face neutral. You saw her? She nodded, looking a little uncomfortable now. Yeah, she checked in last night with a guy. I remember because they looked, well, close. I assumed they were a couple. I swallowed the anger rising in my throat. Do you remember what he looked like? She bit her lip, thinking. Dark hair, taller than her, kind of broad-shouldered. I didn't really pay too much attention, but they definitely seemed familiar with each other. I forced a small, tight smile. Thanks. That's all I needed to know. I turned and walked out of the hotel, gripping my keys so tightly my knuckles turned white. There was no more doubt. No more excuses. No more wondering if I was just being paranoid. My wife had spent the night in a hotel room with another man. Now, I just had to decide what I was going to do about it. I sat in my car outside the hotel, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands ached, staring blankly at the road ahead while my mind spiraled through every possibility, every scenario, every potential excuse Amanda might try to throw at me when I confronted her. I had the truth now, or at least enough of it, but I wasn't ready to let her know that just yet. I needed to control the moment, to make sure she didn't have a way to lie her way out of this, to make sure she couldn't twist my own doubts against me. I took a deep breath, forcing my heartbeat to slow down, before pulling out of the parking lot and heading home. The drive was quiet, the city moving around me like it always did, people going about their lives without any idea that mine was crumbling right in front of me. When I walked into the house, it felt different. The walls, the furniture, even the smell of Amanda's perfume lingering in the air, it all felt like a carefully constructed lie, a staged version of the life I thought I had. I needed to stay calm, to wait, to let the day play out like it always did until the moment was right. When Amanda came home that evening, she was the same as always, dropping her bag by the door, stretching her arms as she walked toward me with that same relaxed, easygoing expression she had every night. Hey, she said casually, walking past me toward the kitchen, opening the fridge to grab a bottle of water. Long day. I watched her carefully, every movement, every word, looking for some sign of guilt, of discomfort, of anything that might indicate she knew she had been caught. But she was good. Too good. There wasn't a single moment of hesitation, no nervous glance, no shift in her tone. She had done this before, I realized. Lied to me, walked through this house like nothing was wrong, acted like my life wasn't a joke. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice even. Long day. She leaned against the counter, sipping her water, watching me over the rim of the bottle. You sure? You seem off. I shrugged, walking past her toward the living room, sitting down on the couch, pretending to flip through my phone. Just tired, I guess. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with that, before sitting across from me, stretching her legs out onto the coffee table. You want to order something for dinner? I don't feel like cooking. I forced a small smile. Sure. Whatever you want. I waited. Let the night play out like it always did. We ate. We watched TV. We talked about nothing. She kissed me goodnight before going to bed. It was normal, almost painfully so, and that made it worse. The way she could look me in the eye, laugh with me, touch me, knowing she had been with someone else, knowing she had spent the night in a hotel with him, knowing she had come home and kissed me with his scent still on her skin, it made me feel sick. I lay awake long after she had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling, the reality of it all pressing down on me. I could confront her now, wake her up, throw the truth in her face, demand answers, but it wouldn't be enough. She would cry, she would lie, she would beg me to believe her, and maybe for a second, I would. No, I needed something she couldn't talk her way out of. The next morning, I got up before her, left the house without saying anything, and drove back to the hotel. I didn't go inside this time. I just sat in my car, watching, waiting. If this had been going on for a while, if this was a routine, then there was a chance she would slip up. Hours passed. People came and went. Businessmen. Travelers. A few couples. Nothing. But just as I was about to give up, ready to go back home and pretend I hadn't spent my entire morning sitting outside a hotel like some kind of private investigator, I saw her car. She pulled into the parking lot, taking the same spot as before, stepping out of the driver's seat like she belonged there, her phone in her hand, texting someone as she walked toward the entrance. I clenched my jaw, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, forcing myself to stay still, to not move, to not storm out of the car and grab her by the wrist and demand to know what the hell she thought she was doing. She walked inside. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Then he arrived. Dark hair. Broad shoulders. Confident stride. He walked inside without hesitation, without looking around, without checking to see if anyone was watching. He had done this before. I felt my stomach turn, the reality of it crashing down on me all at once. This wasn't just some drunken mistake, some one-time lapse in judgment. This was something else. Something planned. Something intentional. I forced myself to breathe, to keep my head clear. This was it. The confirmation I needed. I stepped out of the car, walking toward the entrance, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The receptionist glanced at me as I walked past, but I didn't stop. I took the elevator up to the second floor, my hands shaking as I clenched them into fists, counting the doors as I moved down the hallway. Then I found it. Room 214. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the number, knowing that just a few feet away, my wife was in that room with another man, knowing that whatever lie she had told herself to justify this, whatever story she had crafted to make it okay, it didn't matter anymore. I raised my fist and knocked. A few seconds passed. Then footsteps. Then the door opened. Amanda's face went pale when she saw me, her mouth opening slightly in shock, her body frozen in place. Behind her, just out of my line of sight, I could hear the sound of movement, of someone shifting in bed, of sheets rustling, of quiet panic. I stared at her, waiting for her to say something, waiting for her to come up with some excuse, some pathetic attempt to explain away the undeniable truth. She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel, what are you doing here? I stood in the doorway, staring at Amanda, watching the panic in her eyes as she struggled to process the fact that I was standing there. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, her lips slightly parted, her hands trembling just enough for me to notice. She was wearing a hotel robe, her hair slightly damp like she had just gotten out of the shower. I could hear the bed creak behind her, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone shifting, the rustle of sheets moving, and then silence as the man inside the room realized something was very, very wrong. Amanda blinked rapidly, her body still blocking most of the doorway, trying to keep me from seeing inside, as if there was any chance I didn't already know exactly what was happening. "Daniel," she said again, her voice quieter this time, weaker, as if saying my name would somehow change the reality of the situation. "Why are you?" I pushed past her before she could finish, stepping into the room, my eyes immediately landing on the man sitting on the edge of the bed. He was exactly as I had pictured him, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, younger than me but not by much, probably somewhere in his mid-30s. He was shirtless, only wearing a pair of jeans, his hands still resting on the mattress like he had been about to stand up before I walked in. His face twisted in something between confusion and guilt, but he didn't say a word. Amanda spun around, her hands reaching out like she was about to grab my arm, as if touching me would somehow fix this. "Wait, Daniel, just—" I turned to look at her, my expression blank, my voice cold and even. "Who is he?" She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. I turned back to the man, who was now standing up, his hands slightly raised like he was trying to defuse a bomb. "Look, man," he started, his voice steady but cautious. "I don't want any trouble." I let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Trouble?" I repeated, shaking my head. "You think I'm here to start a fight?" Amanda stepped between us, her hands pressing against my chest, trying to force me back toward the door. "Daniel, please, let's just talk." "Not here. Let's go home and talk." I looked down at her hands before meeting her eyes. "You want to go home and talk?" I repeated, my voice calm, almost detached. "Talk about what, Amanda? How you've been sneaking off to hotels with this guy while I sit at home like an idiot? Or maybe about how you looked me in the eye last night and lied straight to my face?" She flinched like I had struck her, her hands dropping from my chest. "It's not like that," she said quickly, shaking her head. It's complicated." I let out another laugh, this one colder than the last. "Complicated," I echoed. "You're standing in a hotel room, wearing a robe, with some guy who clearly isn't your husband, and you think this is complicated?" The man took a small step back, clearing his throat. "I should probably go." I snapped my head toward him, my eyes narrowing. "Yeah? You think now's a good time to leave?" He hesitated, his jaw clenching. I didn't know she was married. I took a step closer, watching as he stiffened. "You didn't know?" I repeated, glancing at Amanda. "Is that true? You didn't tell him about me?" Amanda didn't answer right away, her arms wrapping around herself like she was trying to make herself smaller. I turned back to the man. "What's your name?" He hesitated, looking between me and Amanda before sighing. "Nick." I nodded slowly, taking a step back toward the door. "Well, Nick, now you know." I turned to Amanda, my voice sharp. "You've got 5 minutes to get dressed. I'm not having this conversation in a hotel room." Amanda opened her mouth, probably to argue, but she must have seen something in my expression that shut her up. She gave a small nod, glancing at Nick one last time before walking toward her suitcase in the corner of the room. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. Standing in the hallway, I felt the full weight of what had just happened settle onto my shoulders. The reality of it all, the hotel, the man, the robe, the way she had looked at me like she had been caught in some nightmare she hadn't planned for. I clenched my fists, breathing deeply through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and Amanda stepped out, now fully dressed, her purse slung over her shoulder, her face pale and drawn. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine for something: anger, sadness, maybe even understanding, but I gave her nothing. "Let's go," I said simply before turning and walking toward the elevator. She followed without a word. The car ride home was silent. I kept my hands on the wheel, my eyes on the road, my jaw locked so tightly it hurt. Amanda sat in the passenger seat, her hands twisting together in her lap, glancing at me every few seconds like she was waiting for me to say something, anything, to break the unbearable quiet. But I didn't. There was nothing to say. When we pulled into the driveway, she let out a shaky breath, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. "Daniel, please." I cut the engine and turned to her. Inside. She hesitated but nodded, stepping out of the car and walking toward the front door. I followed, closing the door behind us before turning to face her. She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand, stopping her. "No more lies," I said, my voice sharp, controlled. "You tell me everything. Right now. How long has this been going on?" She swallowed, looking down at the floor. "A few months." I felt my stomach twist, but I forced myself to stay still. "How did it start?" She took a deep breath, finally meeting my eyes. "I met him at work. It was just flirting at first, Then we started talking outside of work, and then it just happened. I let out a slow, measured breath. Why? Her face crumpled slightly, her voice breaking. I don't know. I shook my head. That's not an answer, Amanda. You don't just wake up one day and decide to cheat on your husband. Why? She ran a hand through her hair, looking away. Because I felt invisible. I laughed bitterly. Invisible? So your solution was to sneak around behind my back and sleep with someone else? She flinched but nodded. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But Daniel, please. I stepped back, shaking my head. We're done talking. Her eyes widened in panic. Wait. I turned away, walking toward the bedroom, my voice calm, final. Pack your things. You're leaving tonight. Amanda didn't move at first. She just stood there, gripping the strap of her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I could hear her breathing, unsteady, shallow, like she was trying to figure out how to react. I didn't care. I walked into the bedroom, pulled open the closet, and grabbed one of the suitcases from the top shelf. The zipper made a sharp noise as I yanked it open and dropped it onto the bed. I didn't have the energy to look at her, to see the pathetic expression I knew she was wearing. You're serious, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't look up. Start packing. She let out a shaky breath. Daniel, please, let's just pack your things, I repeated, my voice steady, final. She didn't move. I could feel her hesitation, could hear the way her breath caught in her throat like she was about to cry, but I didn't care. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I turned and walked past her, heading to the bathroom. I pulled open the drawers, grabbed the things I knew were hers, her toothbrush, her hairbrush, the expensive skin products she always claimed were essential. I dropped them into the suitcase without care, without bothering to check if they were packed neatly. Stop, she said suddenly, stepping toward me, reaching out. Please, Daniel, just stop for a second. I straightened and turned to her, my hands tightening into fists at my sides. Why? So you can try to explain? So you can cry and tell me you didn't mean for this to happen? That it was a mistake? That you love me? She swallowed hard, looking away. That's what I thought. I pushed past her and walked back into the bedroom, my voice sharp. If you don't start packing, I'll do it for you. She shook her head, her hands trembling. Where am I supposed to go? I let out a cold laugh, throwing open another drawer. I don't care. Go to a hotel. Go to a friend's house. Go to him. I turned to her, my eyes hard. You didn't seem too worried about where you were going when you were sneaking around behind my back, so figure it out. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment, I thought she was about to fall apart right in front of me. But I didn't care. I had already fallen apart. I had done it the moment I saw her standing in that hotel room, the moment I heard the way she said my name like she had been caught doing something shameful, the moment I realized that the woman I had built my life with had been lying to me for months. She took a deep breath, then, finally, she started moving. She pulled clothes from the closet, folded them with shaky hands, placed them into the suitcase like she was waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her, making sure she didn't stop, making sure she didn't try to convince me to let her stay. After a few minutes, she spoke again, her voice unsteady. Are you really going to throw everything away over this? I clenched my jaw, breathing deeply before answering. You already threw everything away. She let out a broken laugh, shaking her head. So that's it. 14 years together, and you just decide it's over. I stepped closer, my voice quiet but firm. No, Amanda. You decided it was over when you chose to cheat on me. When you looked me in the eye every day and lied. When you spent the night in a hotel with another man and came home like nothing happened. I shook my head, my voice colder than before. You ended this marriage. I'm just making it official. Her lips pressed together, and she nodded, wiping at her eyes angrily. Fine. She packed the rest in silence. I didn't help. I didn't say another word. I just waited. When she was done, she zipped up the suitcase, grabbed her purse, and turned to face me. I'll come back for the rest later. No. Tell me what you need, and I'll pack it. You don't come back here. Her jaw tightened, but she nodded again. Fine. I walked ahead of her, leading her to the front door, opening it without hesitation. The cold air hit her as she stepped outside, the weight of what was happening finally settling into her shoulders. She turned back to look at me, her eyes searching mine. I never wanted to hurt you. I held the door open wider. Too late. She hesitated for a second longer, then stepped out. I didn't wait to see if she would look back. I shut the door, locked it, and stood there, my hands pressed against the wood, listening as her footsteps disappeared into the night. The silence in the house felt different the moment I locked the door behind Amanda. It wasn't the kind of silence that came from peace or quiet. It was the absence of something that had been ripped away, leaving an empty space behind. I stood there for a moment, my hands still resting on the door, waiting to feel something: relief, satisfaction, anger, but all I felt was exhaustion. I had expected some kind of finality, some wave of emotion to crash over me, but instead, there was nothing. Just the heavy weight of what had happened, of what came next. I walked back into the living room, sat down on the couch, and stared at the wall. The suitcase was gone, but the memories weren't. Every corner of this house had something of her in it. The framed photos on the shelves, the throw blanket she always used, the coffee cup she left in the sink that morning, as if she had expected to come home like any other day. I thought about getting up, about grabbing a trash bag and throwing out everything that reminded me of her, but I didn't have the energy. It wasn't just her things that made this place feel wrong. It was the fact that this house had been ours, and now it was just mine. After a while, I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and stared at the empty space in the closet where her clothes had been. There were still a few things left: shoes, jackets, things she would probably ask for later. I wasn't going to wait for that conversation. I grabbed an empty box, started pulling the rest of her things off the hangers, piling them in without care, without thinking about what each item meant. The sweater she used to wear on cold mornings, the dress she wore on our anniversary last year, the t-shirt she always stole from me to sleep in. It didn't matter anymore. The hardest part was the wedding ring. She had taken it off before she left, placed it on the nightstand like it was just another thing to pack. I picked it up, turning it over in my fingers, remembering the day I put it on her hand, remembering the promises we had made, promises she had broken. I thought about throwing it out, flushing it down the drain, smashing it under my boot just to feel something, but instead, I just dropped it in the box with the rest of her things and sealed it shut. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I didn't wait for Amanda to reach out, didn't wait for some pathetic attempt at reconciliation. I wanted everything done quickly, cleanly, without drawn-out conversations or second chances. She had made her decision, and I was making mine. When I sent her a text telling her that the divorce papers were being drawn up, she didn't reply right away. Hours passed before my phone finally buzzed. "Amanda, are you sure this is what you want?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing my response. "Me, you made sure of it." She didn't reply again. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal documents, moving things around the house, and getting used to a life that didn't include her. People started to find out. Friends reached out, offering their shock and sympathy, asking if I was okay. I told them I was fine because it was easier than explaining everything. My family was angry, my brother offering to drive down just to have a talk with Amanda, but I told him not to waste his time. Nothing he could say would change what had already happened. Amanda sent a few emails about logistics, when she could pick up the rest of her things, what she wanted from the settlement, but there was nothing personal. No long apologies, no desperate attempts to fix things. I think she knew it was too late for that. When she came by to collect the last of her belongings, she didn't even try to come inside. She just stood at the door while I handed her the box, her eyes flickering toward me like she was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. I just nodded, shut the door, and let that be the last time I ever saw her. I had expected the anger to last longer. I thought I would wake up every day hating her, replaying every moment in my head, wondering what I could have done differently. But the more time passed, the more I realized I didn't care anymore. Amanda wasn't my problem. Her choices weren't my problem. I had spent too much time being the man she came home to while she was sneaking off to be with someone else, and now I was free of that. One night, I finally went through my phone and deleted every message, every picture, every trace of her. I blocked her number, not because I thought she would reach out, but because I didn't want to give her the option. Then I sat on the couch, turned on the TV, and realized that, for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to wait up for anyone. I didn't have to wonder where she was, didn't have to question if I was being lied to. The silence in the house didn't feel empty anymore. It just felt like mine.